everyone, and welcome to our 26th episode of Pick to the Scene podcast with me, Rachel.
And me, Andrew.
I'm so sorry to have missed you on the last recording, but not gonna lie, guys, I was very poorly. So very grateful for Andrew for giving me the week off, and he did a great job on the show. I've not listened to the whole episode, not gonna lie, yet, but it is on my to-do list today, Andrew, I promise.
Shock horror.
How was it recording on your own again?
It was weird because I kept wanting to talk to you, but I got through it. It was much shorter than normal.
I bet I wasn't waffling on.
A waffle is important.
Yeah. And on to today's show, which has actually been inspired by a previous recording where Andrew shared with me the shocking story of John and Lorena Bobbitt. Yeah, so just wanted to kind of call out, and I'm sure Andrew has done so already, but a listener actually got in touch with us at the time when that particular crime was mentioned on episode 24, and yeah, corrected some of the facts that Andrew might have stated at the time. So yeah, we just wanted to kind of call it out, didn't we? That it was noted, and apologies for anything that was kind of said that wasn't factually correct.
I tell you something. It's a good job you've already said that you didn't listen to last episode yet, because I said all that. If you hadn't and pretended, people were like, "She's lying."
Yeah, I can't lie. Just a fun fact for our listeners. Can't tell a lie. Cool. Okay, so as is the usual protocol, before we get stuck into today's episode, I have a couple of bits to run through with you, our wonderful, dedicated listeners. I would like to remind you that this is a true crime podcast, so listener caution is advised. Now, there is a trigger warning on today's episode. We are covering a case on domestic abuse, and when conducting the research for this show, there were many varying opinions on the case. Now, I have tried to stay as neutral as possible, but where I do make a comment, it is my own opinion. I'm not stating facts. Okay, so we welcome your feedback on the episode and on the show in general. So please head over to our socials and subscribe and rate us on your podcast app of choice. It continues to amaze me how many of you keep on returning to listen to the show. We're so lucky to have you with us, and we always love to hear from you. So if you do rate us, I just want to say one more time, please go out and recommend us to a friend, as we'd love to continue growing our listener base. And now the admin part is over, Andrew. How have you been since we last caught up?
I've been great, fine and dandy, Rachel.
Good, a little healthier than I have been.
Yes, a little healthier.
Just for the benefit of our listeners, I found out yesterday what I had, and it was acute food poisoning. It was awful. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very grateful to be back and healthy again and able to look after my daughter, even, come to work. Yeah, all is well again. So in case anyone was worried, back to full health now.
I bet that's the last time you eat food that you find on the floor.
Or that's cooked by my fiance.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, and listen, I can't not mention it. It's episode 26. What are you thinking about that?
Do you know what? If people are wondering why she's saying episode 26, it's a year, because we produce bi-weekly. That makes it a year. So it's crazy. A year's worth of episodes.
Yeah,
And
yeah. A fortnightly pod, a full year of Picture the Scene, and it just feels amazing to have reached that milestone.
it does, yeah. It does, yeah. And we've not been like cancelled or anything yet.
Buzzing. No, no.
And just as an aside, as well as our social medias, which we advertise on a frequent basis, we did actually launch our Patreon a couple of weeks ago. Now it's just to try and, at the moment, get an extra microphone for Rachel and whatnot. But I've set the tiers at, I think it's £1 or euro. I can't remember which currency I did it in, but 1 unit per month. So it's not a huge amount. So if anyone wants to support us, we'd be happily accept it and be grateful. But if you don't, we're still going to produce the content, so it's all good.
Yeah, and we're looking at how we kind of produce some additional content for our Patreon supporters, aren't we, Andrew? So
Yes,
will
when we
be
have some, we
benefit.
will.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, I just kind of wanted to drop in here, not something I've mentioned to you previously, but I actually think we should re-record episode 1 as a 1 year special. What do you reckon, Andrew?
Do you know what? I was thinking about this myself the other day. We seriously haven't discussed this,
No?
people, but I was thinking about suggesting that to you the other day because I did have someone on one of the socials. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. Say to me, "This is great, but where's episode one?" And I
Yep.
said, "Well, it's because Rachel didn't exist then, and
I did
I'm not."
exist.
Yes, but not
Rudely
for
wasn't
existing.
invited. I agree with you. And I have a couple of friends who have recommended the pod too, and they're like, for their like OCD or just general, like where the hell's episode one? So yeah, why don't we just get it recorded as a 1 year special?
Why not? I've still got the script, so
Yeah, let's go.
let's
Cool.
do it.
Okay, but for now, are you ready for some true crime?
Most definitely, yes.
Okay, well, if it's safe for you to do so, I'd like all of you to relax, close your eyes, and picture the scene. Today, we're taking you back in time to Tuesday, the 22nd of June in 1993, to a town called Manassas in Virginia in the US. On any normal day, Manassas is a charming, sleepy old town, but at Picture the Scene, we don't do normal days now, do we? On this day, temperatures reached highs of 31.1 degrees Celsius, 87.98 degrees Fahrenheit, and skies were completely clear that evening, leaving the residents of Manassas with a beautiful sunset at around 8:38 p.m. Not long before sunset that day, Lorena Bobbitt, a 24-year-old nanny and manicurist, had finished her shift at work, and after a long, hot day in the salon, she returned home in the early evening, only to find her husband, John, was out drinking with his friend, Robert, who was visiting from New York. Robert and John had left earlier that day to hit the town and meet some friendly faces around DC and have a laugh. They had no firm plans other than to see where the afternoon of drinking would take them. John was discharged from the Marines 2 years earlier in 1991, and he'd not been able to hold down a steady job since leaving. This had left Lorena to cover the household bills and maintenance with her two jobs as a nanny and manicurist at the local nail salon. And as you can imagine, knowing he'd been out spending money and drinking all afternoon had riled her up somewhat.
That would that would I know I don't swear often, but that would piss me off something chronic. If I was working two jobs and I knew my other half was just drinking the money away in the afternoon as well, so it's not even if it's an evening drink. Yeah.
I agree. I agree, especially like it's been a hot day, probably wouldn't mind a nice cool drink yourself and, spending some time with your partner or, whatever that looks like or a friend. Yeah, you'd be pretty annoyed. I agree. She's about to get even more annoyed though. Just spoiler alert. Okay, so later on that evening, Lorena took herself off to bed and at some point fell asleep until around 4 a.m. the following day, Wednesday, 23rd of June, when John and Robert returned to the apartment, awaking Lorena as they bashed around the home with no consideration for anyone who might be asleep. In Lorena's words, John was loaded to the gills with alcohol, crawled into bed, and decided to help himself because, and she quotes here, "That's my wife, and I do what I want." Lorena claimed at this point he ripped her underwear and proceeded to rape her, as was the norm when he returned home drunk. Shortly after the assault, John had rolled over and proceeded to fall asleep, at which point Lorena made a move towards the kitchen for a glass of water, which had almost become a ritual after her husband's drunken nights. But on this fateful night, things took a sinister turn. As she stood sipping her water, Lorena clocked the kitchen knife on the countertop and without thinking immediately grasped it in her hand, quoted as saying, "So many things came to my mind," told ABC News during an interview back in 93. Things like the very first time he hit me, the torture, the beatings, the forced sex, everything. It just came so fast. And with the knife clenched in her hand, Lorena proceeded to move back to the bedroom, where she removed the sheets off her sleeping husband and cut his penis clear off.
Yes, I mean, I'm thinking about this, and obviously when I spoke about it, I only had vague memories. But to start with, I think you shouldn't have to, not that you shouldn't, sorry, that's the wrong word, you shouldn't ever feel that you can take something like that from someone. I don't mean her taking his penis. I mean him forcing himself on her. It's
Yeah.
just because you're in a relationship. It doesn't mean that you can.
Well, it took
There still has to be a two-way agreement on these things, doesn't there?
absolutely consent is still very much needed, especially in the case of like being drunk as well. When one party is and one party isn't. But luckily this was many years ago, what, nearly 30 years ago, and marital rape is now a thing. So absolutely categorically, you know, he would have been breaking the law, doing what he did that night.
He would have been, but sadly, it wouldn't have stopped. I don't think he would have stopped him. For people that do this sort of thing, I don't think the fact that it's seen as, well, it is illegal and seen as wrong by most people, it isn't seen as wrong by these people because they do it in the first place, don't they?
No, but it might have given her more ammunition maybe to
Yeah, I guess what you're
know that
saying.
things aren't right. And
And a
yeah,
different outlet rather than having to resort to chopping his willy
it's
off.
my yeah, and her even getting in the mindset if he's my husband, he can do what he want with me. And
Yes, yes.
I'm not for 1 minute saying that she ever thought like that, but yeah. Now, I did just want to pause here to discuss how things escalated at such a pace that evening, because a mere 24 hours earlier, Lorena had been at the local police station to take out a protective order against her husband.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
yeah, yeah. And she actually ended up leaving without taking out the protective order because the officers informed her it could take up to 3 hours to process the request. But knowing her husband was abusive, why on earth did she return to the marital home on the 22nd?
I can't answer the question because I've not been in
Mm,
that situation, but I
no.
guess it's, for want of a horrible phrase, sometimes it's better the devil you know, isn't it?
Yeah, and on that point, Lorena was not a US native. So she was born in Ecuador in 1969 and raised in Venezuela, but she spent her childhood attending Catholic church and watching American television. So from a very early age, set her sights on living the American dream with hopes of one day marrying a wholesome American man. That day finally came when she was granted her US student visa. She enrolled in the Northern Virginia Community College and then shortly after met John Bobbitt in late 1988. Only a mere 9 months later, on the 18th of June 1989, Lorena and John married. Now, they both have very different stories of how the proposal played out and how their marriage started in the good old he said, she said fashion, but they both agree on the fact that they were young and crazy in love at the time of the wedding.
Sounds like a dream, doesn't it? You want to get to a country, you get there, you find love, you start an education. It does sound like the beginning of a stereotypical feel-good movie, doesn't it?
Yeah, and just think how it played out as well. She met a Marine, like, John was in
Yeah,
uniform almost permanently, and like if she'd have seen like one of the TV shows she watched was the Flintstones, but yeah, if she'd have seen like American kind of movies where, Top Gun would have been out by then, right? She'd have met her very own.
Top Gun was
Yeah.
1988, I think.
So she'd have
Possibly.
met her very own, Tom Cruise would have, well, I know he wasn't a Marine, but yeah, a uniform man, and how that must have played out in her head must have been magical.
Yeah,
But only 2 months later, Lorena claims the physical abuse started, with John attacking and assaulting her on multiple occasions. Reading into this case, which has been covered on multiple US news channels, as you can imagine, I found there were a number of complaints of domestic violence at the Bobbitt's apartment over the coming years, and claims of violence and arguing by both parties. But only in one instance were charges actually brought forward, with John being arrested on assault and battery. However, he actually got a cross warrant against Lorena at the time and charged her with assault and battery. This
crazy.
ultimately led Yeah, yeah. But like I didn't even realize that was a thing, husband's kind of charged. Okay, well, I'm going to cross charge her. But it ultimately led to the charges being completely dismissed. Now, at this point, it wasn't Lorena's only brush with the law prior to cutting her husband's penis off. In the years running up to that incident, she was caught and admitted shoplifting several dresses from a Nordstrom store. Now, she ended up doing some community service as punishment for that crime. But she also stole $7,000 from her friend and employer, Jana Basutti. Now, she's a salon owner. Now, Jana soon found out what had happened and made her pay back every penny she took. But Basutti continued to employ her and support her as a friend despite the
Wow,
theft.
that's amazing,
Yeah,
isn't it? What sort
I,
of that's a friend that we all want, isn't it?
I
I mean,
know.
we don't, not so we can steal from them, but that sort of loyalty and friendship that you'd still stand by someone who's done something like that to you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I find it really heartwarming because usually these things don't play out that way, do they?
No,
Um, but we know obviously that Lorena was working in that nail salon at the time of the incident with John. So yeah, obviously Jana had probably seen she was young, vulnerable, and kind of taken her under her wing and looked after her.
That's nice.
Now, again, it's a tricky one, but I'm going to approach it. If John was an abuser, and I'll explain in a bit why I've used the word was, I can't imagine that that would have sat well with him. You do hear of controlling partners being absolutely outraged when the abused does something that could bring a spotlight or shame on the family.
Yes.
So I really can't imagine it was a great time in the Bobbitt household. But I also can't help but wonder what she did with the $7,000 as well. Obviously, she had to pay back every penny, but it wasn't documented anywhere, about that particular theft. It was well documented that Lorena had expensive taste and yearned for the luxurious lifestyle. After they married, John was quoted as them having to leave a studio apartment for a more luxurious two-bed apartment, something he protested was a big struggle on their two wages. So yeah, I don't know whether that $7,000 might have been used to support the cost of living at the time.
Although just to like, I'm not siding with either party here, but he was complaining that a two-bedroom apartment was a struggle on the two wages that she was earning.
Well, no, at the time he was still in the Marines
Ah, okay, fair
when
enough.
they moved. But yeah, he got discharged later, which is when she took up the second job. But you're right, he was discharged from the Marines, and whilst he did try and get work and he was in and out of work, he couldn't make a job hold down. So he wasn't giving it his, full effort to keep that household afloat. And yeah, that's where I think maybe the $7,000 was used to support, pay rent, put food on the table.
Fair enough.
And, I've kind of already mentioned it was really tricky to navigate a lot of the press articles written at the time as they really sensationalized the crime and made John look like a victim of a frenzied attack from a lover scorned. And I say this because John, who was 26 at the time of the incident, believes Lorena was actually provoked by his request for a divorce, which he dropped into conversation just days earlier.
So he requested a divorce. Or is that what he's claiming?
Yes. No, I was going to say, obviously, there's no kind of like official documentation requesting a divorce, but he'd apparently dropped it into conversation that, they obviously didn't love each other anymore, and that, yeah, he wanted a divorce.
See, I was at that time, this was 1993,
Hmm.
so I was 13. I'm giving my age away there.
Hmm.
I was 13, but I did actually read the newspapers quite a lot then. And I remember mainly the newspapers I read anyway. It was all about just he'd gone to sleep and she decided
Mm.
just to chop it off and drive down the street and throw it out the window with no like full
Spoiling the story here.
backstory. Yeah. And that's why I said it to you because that's all I could remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's strange how. See, this is why, actually, going off on a tangent slightly here.
Mm.
At the time, that type of news reporting, and it wasn't just for that story, that was seen as perfectly normal and standard, wasn't it? And it wasn't,
Yeah.
and it's only looking back on it with hindsight that you can think, oh wow, how biased or incorrect was that? But because it was seen as normal, it those type of things do impact the attitude that you have, don't you? And the opinion that you have and how
I,
you
I I feel that not a lot's been rectified in the media in this day and age, though. And whilst the court would play it out very differently, I feel the media would still sensationalize the act of a crazy woman. The words that they use are very clever. You know, woman cuts man's penis off. Woman must have been angry and crazy, and
yeah.
all of this instead of what possibly could that man have done to deserve such a brutal attack. And again, it's very tricky to stay neutral. This is just my opinion, but I will go on to touch on some of this. Yeah.
Well, I wait with bated breath.
Yeah. So John's timeline of events plays out very differently to Lorena's. John has vehemently denied any allegations of abuse, physically or mentally, throughout their relationship. And in fact, he counter-argued that Lorena was a volatile, jealous, and manipulative wife who always threatened violence if he looked at another woman, never mind suggested leaving her. Now, this case has reignited debate in the press and media in recent times following the Me Too movement and laws being passed on marital rape, and of course the spotlight on domestic violence and specifically coercive control. But this was massively overshadowed during the original trial back in 1994, with the story actually sparking jokes, limericks, and even a TV special which raised $250,000 to cover the outstanding costs of John's surgery. I just want to stop and kind of say, where was the financial, emotional, and physical support for Lorena? She was the subject of so many jokes in the 90s, and to me, that just feels really unkind and cruel. Even if, even if she had this, psychotic break where she didn't realize what she was doing at the time, like, where was the support for her? Whilst John was kind of going off and kind of attending TV appearances and, you know, branding himself as, the man, that
Yeah,
that was the victim. Like, I really couldn't help but feel sorry for her when, she was the butt of the jokes. And yeah, it's just no one was kind of putting an arm around her at the time, making sure she was okay.
exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so let's go back to the night in question. Shortly after the attack, Lorena fled the apartment, holding the knife in one hand and her husband's penis in the other. Now she got into the car and drove off. At the time, she said she was in such a state over what she'd done, she didn't even realize she was still holding on to the penis when she got into the car. In her TV interview, she stated, I can recall I couldn't make a turn because my hands were full, and then I saw what it was. I looked closely at it and screamed. I just threw it out the window and drove off as fast as I could. Lorena eventually arrived at her boss, Basuti's house, where she collapsed in hysterics, not to mention covered in blood, and so Basuti called the police. Upon her arrest, Lorena was taken down to the station, and in her police statement, which was tape recorded, she was asked why she'd cut off the penis, and her response was, "He always has orgasm, and he doesn't wait for me to ever have orgasm. He's selfish."
Oh, so does that it kind of goes against what she said, doesn't it? Because unless,
Yeah,
of course, she was afraid, she could have been afraid, but maybe I don't know. It,
I mean, she's being interviewed by two men, and
yes,
she's had a moment of, you know, um, realizing what she's done. She said it herself, like in the car, kind of comes to. She might just be, defending herself, not maybe not wanting to get John in trouble as well. I don't know.
it could also
Um,
it could also be. I'm thinking out loud here, so this could be totally wrong. But when you have like diminished responsibility, when they say you
mm,
have a psychotic break or something snaps, she could have been trying all this time, and this is my opinion, to try and justify to herself
mm,
why he does what he does, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
And some of her justification could have been, I'm not saying it was a right justification, but it could have been, well, he's my husband, I'm his wife, I should not question when he wants to do this type of thing, I should just let him do it. And so in her head, if she's trying to normalize it, I think
mm,
the act isn't wrong, but she's got all this anger because she's deep down she knows it's wrong, but she's trying to normalize it. It
yeah,
could be, well, he didn't even let me finish because he's trying, that type of thing. I don't know. I'm just
yeah.
trying to
And
piece it together in my head.
and the other thing to kind of highlight at this stage is that this abuse had been going on for what, 4 years since their marriage
Wow.
started. So,
Yes.
if it is indeed like as bad as she says it is, there'd been this chronic like abuse pattern, and she was essentially a victim, but potentially, worried about getting her husband in trouble because she'd not ever cried out that he'd, raped her before.
What's
So,
what's the word I'm looking for? Do you know when someone's been in prison for too long and they say they're institutionalized, i.e., they can't,
mm,
if they was released, they couldn't cope on the outside.
yeah.
What's the equivalent word I'm looking for if someone's been in an abusive relationship and they don't see a
Isn't it
way
like
out?
Munchausen's?
No,
No.
Munchausen is no.
Is that when you empathize with your attacker, your abuser, your captor?
Stockholm syndrome. Could it be that?
Oh, yeah, I don't know the word for that, Andrew. She was charged later on that morning with malicious wounding, and officers warned her if found guilty, she'd face up to 20 years in prison.
Wow.
I can't help as well but think that those officers must have been wincing when they were interrogating her. Like, you know,
It would have been wincing, but also you got to think it was probably extremely biased as well.
yeah, definitely, two middle-aged male
And they have to,
officers.
yeah, they have to also. No, obviously they're good police people out there, but they're also bad. Like every profession, you get good and bad in every job.
Yeah,
They'll be target driven, and their target is to solve crimes. So if
yeah,
they see a vulnerable woman in front of them who it's obvious that she's done what is being accused of, and she's probably admitting to it as well,
yeah,
they're probably putting the pressure on as well
yeah, yeah.
to get the result. I mean, I probably watch too much NYPD Blue, but they're probably putting the pressure on to get like a slam dunk, they call it, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so meanwhile, on the other side of town, John, who'd actually slept through the splicing as he was so intoxicated. Ooh. He
Did
only,
did he say? I'm cutting you off here. I know people don't like that, but did he? He slept through it, and he just carried on being asleep.
well, he woke up in a pool of blood. So,
Also, he was
yeah.
awake before the police got there.
Well, the police didn't get there, yeah. Let me play this one out.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so he only woke up after the penis was off and screamed out to his friend Robert, who then sped the pair off to the nearest hospital, which I actually found really strange as they were tanked. But again, I can't see anything that suggested they got in a taxi. So yeah, I
Did you
just thought that
say?
was a bit odd.
Sorry.
His
Did you
friend
say?
Robert drove him to the hospital.
Yeah. Did you say he drove in a tank?
No, he was tanked. They were
Oh,
drunk.
tanks. Sorry.
Yeah. No, he didn't get in a
I
tank.
was just
But
imagining
that would have been
driving down the street.
sensationalized in the
I
story, wouldn't it?
was
And
going to
then
say, it'd
got
be
in a
like
tank.
it'd also be about 5 miles an hour, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, upon arrival to the emergency department, the doctor on call actually thought the blood was coming from a wound on John's wrist, but it didn't take long to realize that there was no cuts on his arm or his wrist. And when the emergency doctor discovered where the blood was coming from, his jaw dropped to the floor.
It would, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. Now, immediately, he contacted the plastic surgeon and the urologist, but I just wanted to pause to highlight at this point the penis was still MIA. So,
Of
what the
course,
hell?
yeah.
Yeah, what the hell must that poor doctor been thinking about calling in a plastic surgeon neurologist when he's got nothing to work with here? Like,
Yeah,
and I don't mean to sound like I'm making light of it, but just in my head, I was, if I can chuckle at one element of this case, it's that the A&E doctor was like, "Yep, get the plastic surgeon on the phone," but the penis has not been located. Like,
yeah. You'd be like,
yeah.
what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, exactly. So I did read an article, but it was so biased. But yeah, I read this article about this plastic surgeon's like journey to the hospital, thinking, right, so the penis hasn't been located, but I'm gonna need to surgically attach it. I've done this on plenty of fingers. I'll be fine. But yeah, like just a bit wild.
But don't they have like? I'm not a biologist here, but don't they have like tubes and stuff they have to hook back up again?
You know what? I kind of, yeah, I don't know. I'm not
Let's
gonna
not
lie,
let's not
don't
go
know.
there. Yeah.
But luckily for John, shortly after his arrival at hospital, the penis was located in a small field on the side of a road. Now, there was a 7-Eleven nearby. There always appears in American, like, crime stories or dramas, whatever. There's 7-Elevens are everywhere. But
Yeah, they
yeah,
are. Yeah.
yeah, the officers who found the penis called in. They grabbed a hot dog bag, filled it with ice, placed the penis in, and transported it to hospital. Ouch. Can you imagine, like, that
That's a
being,
that's a bit of
oh,
luck, really, because
yeah,
because
it's like 5 o'clock in the morning.
finding it. Yeah. Did it? Did I read somewhere? I don't mean to contradict you here.
No.
That she led them to where she threw it out the window.
She might, I mean, no, I didn't read anything that suggested she was out with the cops searching for the dick. Sorry, the penis.
I may have just been making it up.
Yeah, no, just that they were literally searching through a field with torches. Well, field. So she must have said it was off of this roundabout or this was nearby or it was approximately 10 minutes drive from the house where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you'll probably all be well aware that the penis was surgically reattached after a 9.5 hour surgery, with John having most of his original functionality restored. In fact, John went on to star in a porn movie called John Wayne Bobbitt Uncut. And actually, I think I read he did another porn movie at a later date because his penis wasn't fully functioning in the time of the original one. I think he was, for bragging rights, wanted to kind of like show it in its full function. Although I just do want to caveat that I'm not sure there are any scenes of his actual John Thomas in action. And whilst I understand we have to research our cases, I did draw the line at researching that one.
Well, I am like I'm shocked.
No, couldn't. No,
What sort of research is this?
I know, yeah, no, half a job. But the Bobbitt case,
I'm
Bobbitt
sorry.
case, don't apologise. The Bobbitt case has actually been referred to in a number of movies and songs. So I'm just going to list off a couple to name a few. So Fight Club, the movie Lady Killers, which was the Coen Brothers 2004 remake, an episode of
Terrible
Family
film.
Guy. Oh, is it not a great film?
Ridiculous. I love the Coen Brothers, but I didn't like that film.
No, I've not seen it. Seen it. It was referred to an episode of Family Guy. You can guess who was involved in that scene. Quagmire and Peter. An Eminem song, a Philip Roth novel, and even as recently as a Lizzo song, to name a
Who's
few.
Lizzo is a singer?
Yes, Lizzo is a singer. Hair Toss, have you heard that song?
Hair toss?
Yeah. Well, Good as Hell, I think it's called. But
No,
does
I
her
don't.
hair toss check the nails?
I
I'm not
don't.
gonna sing.
I don't
If you
listen to pop music.
if you had a 5-year-old daughter like I do, that's a firm favorite in the household. Yeah, easy, catchy lyrics. Yeah. So yeah. So now we're just going to move on to the trial. So the case went to trial, and in fact, it went to two separate trials. So late in 1993 for John, and early in 1994 for Lorena. John was charged with the marital sex assault based on Lorena's claims that he'd raped her. He pled not guilty, and his court case lasted just 3 days, running from the 8th to the 10th of November. And John was eventually acquitted of all charges after a short deliberation from the jury on the 11th of November. Now, cameras were not allowed inside the court as it was a sexual assault case, which I completely understand, but it doesn't seem fair when Lorena's trial was broadcast for the media for everyone to see.
No, that's not fair.
Mm-mm. So, as mentioned earlier, Lorena was charged for and trialed for malicious wounding and claimed to the court that John had sexually assaulted, abused, and raped her for years. Lorena's trial lasted a total of 13 days, starting on the 10th of January and running until the 22nd of January 1994. She was eventually found not guilty due to temporary insanity on the 24th of January 1994 and was sent to a psychiatric ward for 45 days. She was released on the 1st of March 1994 and deemed not a threat to herself or society. Shortly after, unsurprisingly, she filed for divorce from John, which was finalized in 95, 2 years after the incident.
Wow.
During the trial, despite intense media coverage and many making jokes about the case, Lorena amassed hundreds of supporters who saw her as a survivor taking on extreme measures against her alleged abuser, which I'm sure would have helped her cope knowing she had so many behind her rooting for her. But bearing in mind that trial was 6 or 7 months after the incident, so she spent a fair bit of time, on her own, with that intense media coverage and not having those supporters backing her
Yeah.
outside the courts. Both John and Lorena went on to face further arrests and charges in the late 1990s and early 2000s. So Lorena was arrested for assaulting her mother. He was later found not guilty, but John actually had 3 separate charges brought against him. One in 1999, which was a felony charge, which he pled guilty to, of attempted robbery after stealing $140,000 worth of clothes from a store in Nevada.
Wow. I'm guessing that store wasn't Primark.
Well, he was a lorry truck driver, so I'm guessing he, potentially claimed. And I didn't read into the story because I didn't want to sensationalize again like any of his crimes after the case that I covered. But I'm guessing he, claimed that the lorry had been ransacked or that he maybe just thought he could get away with taking that much worth of clothing and no one would really blink an eye. But it must have been a big chain store.
Yeah.
Now, that same year, he was found guilty of harassing an ex-girlfriend. And then later on in 2002, he was charged with battering his third wife. And, just want to pause again. 3 wives. Can't believe 2 other women married him after what had happened. But eventually he was found not guilty of the battery charges against his third wife. So
Yeah.
again, I know Something that's been said is that, he's clearly got form because, he was charged with something at a later date, but yeah, he was found not guilty. So he's actually not had a great life since the early 2000s. He was involved in a road traffic accident and has lost the use of his legs. So he's now wheelchair bound. He comes out every so often doing interviews, kind of, to keep the money trickling in on references to the Bobbitt case. So he is kind of funding his lifestyle through that. But Lorena, I just kind of wanted to finish on a really positive note. Lorena has since gone on to set up a foundation, Lorena's Red Wagon Foundation, which is a non-profit that helps domestic abuse survivors. Lorena has also been key in the community. She stayed in Manassas, where she obviously lived with John. And she's been a pillar of the community with fundraisers and, helping out at the school. Every time there is a documentary on the case, Lorena steps down and steps out of kind of her post with her foundation and, the school and the community as well, for out of respect, whilst, the dust kind of settles, and then we'll regroup and refocus. She absolutely doesn't use the case to promote herself or make any money from it. She settled down with a partner, although never remarried. They share a daughter together and have been together for over 20 years.
That's good news, then.
Yeah, yeah. So I just kind of want to highlight one more time, this was a really tricky case to cover, and given both parties were actually found not guilty of the charges brought against them, which I kind of referenced at the start, it was a giant case of he said, she said. And I do actually feel, this is my own opinion, that the jury passed the only verdict they could when brought up against such tricky charges and testimony and character references, because at the end of the day, that's what the jury is there for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's good to get some more information on it. And yeah, it's an odd one. I think that, my opinion from listening to you, and I read a little bit as well in between episodes, I can't believe that there wasn't in one form or another some form of abuse. Now, 100% there was definitely a dysfunctional relationship, whichever way you look at it. But I don't see how there's always trigger points for things, and if I'm giving my opinion here, but if Lorraine had some sort of psychological issue, then this would have cropped up again and again afterwards, wouldn't it? Because what you said, she spent she even spent 45 days in an institution and they deemed her fine. So I don't know. It feels like there must have been some sort of abuse. Now, I guess the only people who truly know that will be him and her. And looking at the way the two lives have gone since then, the fact that his life has turned to crap and her life seems to have flourished, it probably indicates where the issue was. But again, I guess that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that was really sensitively put, and I would agree with you. I'm inclined to suggest that, it absolutely on both sides wasn't your kind of standard relationship, clearly volatile and with thoughts and feelings, but, you know, no one deserves to be taken advantage of, regardless of marriage or, anything like that. And I feel like at the time, if this had been tried in today, if this had happened recently, I don't think the press would have done anything different. I think they absolutely would have sensationalized everything. However, I feel like the John probably would have faced some sort of repercussions of his actions, like towards, you might not be guilty of all of those charges, but actually there's a pattern of abuse here, and that's what you are guilty of, and maybe that might have played out that way, but he was just acquitted after a 3-day trial, and it was a breeze. Like, the jury were out for a couple of hours and then, yeah, not guilty, whereas Lorena's very different, and I get it, the charges were completely different as well, but yeah, I just feel like maybe if it had been tried in today's world, it would have been very different.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I would have to say, Rachel, I always love it when you do an episode because it's nice to sit back and listen, and I know you put a lot of effort into them, so thank you. I've as much as you can enjoy listening about this type of thing, I have enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for the recommendation, Andrew. So, thank you too. And if any of our amazing listeners have any suggestions for any future episodes, please get in touch and we'll add you to the list.
And what we would do before the next episode, I'm committing Rachel to something here.
Yeah.
So I'll cut this out, Rach, if you don't agree. But we'll record the first episode again,
Yep.
just as an extra, and
Yeah.
then the next episode we record as normal.
Yep. Perfect. Let's get it done.
Awesome. Great.
Okay, so for one last time today, I'd like all of you to relax, close your eyes, and picture the scene. It's a hot summer evening. You're settling down into bed. You might want to consider falling asleep on your front.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And before we go, we're actually recording this, everyone, on the 26th of August, Friday the 26th of August. And it is today International Dog Day. And it's there
Yay!
to recognise dogs who provide support and service to people. So if you do have a little furry friend with four legs who barks, then give him an extra treat.
Love it. Yes, that sounds amazing. And share your photos of your dogs, guys. We
Uh,
love dogs.
I love dog photos, yes.
Oh, lovely. Thanks, guys, and thanks, Andrew.
Thanks all. Goodbye.